Hey, BATT Family. Welcome to another entry in our series of This or That. In today's edition, this is going to be This, That, or the Other Thing, the Span series. So we're looking at Wingspan, Wyrmspan, and Finspan. I have known not necessarily the explicit details of what the other two were, but I had heard through the grapevine that there were always going to be three versions of the Span series. Wingspan kicked it off. Wyrmspan was the more advanced, heavier version, and Finspan is the newer, lighter, more approachable version. So we wanted to look at this on a variety of factors, and now that we have Finspan in hand, we've both played it, we thought it would be worth talking about it, comparing them, and just trying to give kind of an overall comparison on the three games.
Exactly.
As a historical reference, we'll say, way back in episode 2, we cut a segment out of our table shelf and trade because we did not feel confident enough in our overall opinion at the time, and we hadn't gone through Gen Con, we hadn't gone through all that, but we wanted to be more sure in our opinions of Wyrmspan. That is what got cut. So we are going to be discussing all three of them today, and we have some specific categories we're going to be rating them on. But I will say, moving into this, because I have gotten to know Connie, I really like Connie, the designer. I'm sorry for what is about to occur.
Yeah, agreed. Also met Connie, lovely woman.
APR is amazing.
APR is amazing, and we will discuss Wyrmspan.
Yes. So let's go ahead and kick this thing off. All right, so first off, we just want to give a high-level overview of the three games.
Yeah.
Because, we should at least have some basis of comparison. So all three of them are engine-building, card-based games that have a different variety of resources and actions. When you're looking at the three games, Wingspan is going to have 3 rows that have 5 placement sections each, and there are 4 actions within. Play a bird, get resources, lay eggs, and draw cards. When you're looking at Wyrmspan, you're looking at 3 rows with 4 spaces across, though arguably 8 because you can play 2 cards in each space, with 3 actions of excavate, entice, and explore. And then you have Finspan, which is going to have 3 columns now, and there are 6 spaces within each column divided into 3 regions, and only 2 actions. Play a fish, go dive. So when you're looking at it, it is clear that there were design beats taken and streamlined because at this point, crazily enough, Wingspan is 6 years old. It came out in January of 2019.
Which is crazy.
Yeah. And we had Wyrmspan in February of 2024 and Finspan in January of 2025.
Yeah. Vastly different games.
Hugely different games. Yeah.
Which is amazing.
So, like we said, Wyrmspan was intended to be the more advanced, heavier version of Wingspan, and Finspan is the lighter, more approachable. When we look at this, so we have our categories we're going to break down into, it is so wild to me that the system is so flexible that we have 3 very different games using what is largely the same basic idea.
It's nutty.
So, okay, so let's go into our first point of comparison. Let's talk about the theme. Wingspan is birds, Wyrmspan is dragons, Finspan is fish.
Yes. Which I think is really interesting that we have this fantasy sandwich. Wyrmspan is all fantastic dragons, stuff that, nothing that's been in any books. It's all original art, original design, original, little nuances, where we're definitely dealing with Wingspan and Finspan. They're real. They come with a little blurb that say, hey, this is what this is. This is where you find it. There's something about it. So it's kind of interesting that you have that right there, those differences.
I think I find of the 3, Wingspan is the most thematic because on the card itself, in addition to the beautiful art and everything that's there, and the same artist, and in fact, Ana Maria Martinez, who did a lot of the art along with Natalia Rojas in Wingspan, went into Finspan with her sister, Catalina Martinez, as well as support art from a couple other artists. And what I found is when you look at Wingspan, everything makes sense. A duck goes in the water because that's where ducks go. They eat fish because it makes sense.
Yep.
And you have the little blurb on there, which is great. but it also shows you where in the world they are. So I love that thematic integration of here is everything about the bird. We are being as correct as we can about it. And this is the amount of eggs that can be laid, abstracted out, but this is the type of nest. They really went all in on that theme.
Yeah.
I think Finspan is good, but not great, because while it does return the blurb onto the cards, there's no particular reason for a fish being in a particular place. The powers on the Wingspan birds are all feel representative, where in Finspan, it's generally lay an egg, hatch an egg, move a young, that type of thing. Mm-hmm. And what is there feels like mechanical versus thematic in a way that Wingspan had.
Say that again.
So in Wingspan, everything makes sense to the bird.
Right.
Like you have a predator that's going to eat smaller birds, all that type of stuff. When you're looking at Finspan, other than the fact that bigger fish eat smaller fish, because that's just the way fish are, why a particular fish is going to lay an egg for just you or lay an egg for everybody doesn't really make sense.
Okay, that part makes sense. Because I was sitting there going, well, no, like some of the fish that are involved, I mean, they're put into the proper spot within the water ecosystem.
They are, but again, because you're just kind of representatively in the oceans,
right?
You're still like you're going to have fish in regions of the world that shouldn't be next to each other.
Oh yeah, very much so.
But I think that is still a stronger theme than Wyrmspan, where we have beaten this one up at length between us because there's no theme here.
There's no theme.
Why the red dragons live in the red caverns, which aren't going to end up being red anyway, other than the fact they just eat meat. There's no location. There's nothing really tying the dragon to the mechanisms. And even that book of dragon facts is frustrating because they've taken what I love seeing on Wingspan and now again on Finspan of, here's a little fact about the fish. In Wyrmspan, you have to go to an external book. It's not on the cards. We don't have a place for settings. So there's one entry in that book that talks about some dragon law of the 1970s. Where is that law? Are we on Earth? Are we somewhere else? Mm-hmm. Is this a United States law? Is it a Slovakian law? Like I got nothing.
Yeah.
And so I have a really, really bad interaction with this theme because while the art is beautiful, and we'll get to that, there's no thematic tie to anything here.
There's nothing bringing me back.
Sure.
I can go grab all the... I mean, I can sit there and look at all the cards within Wingspan and Finspan and Wyrmspan and get to look at them all and enjoy them all, but like playing the game and sticking them in their spots and stuff like that with Wingspan and Finspan, like I'm looking at them more and I want to know more about them. Mm-hmm. And then, but with Wyrmspan, I'm just like, I'm going to put this thing down here so I can go farther into the cave.
Yeah. Well, and I actually think that's something that Finspan has over the others in a thematic sense of you can just play a fish anywhere mm-hmm. on the board so long as it matches the road that they go to.
Yeah.
Which I love the idea of, this is a fish that lives in the Twilight Zone, like just appears on the Twilight Zone. Like you don't have to fill your sunlight zone before you move down.
Right. And then, unless there's a border, which I think that's such a cool little mechanism right mm-hmm. there, because some of the cards either have a blue border on the far edge, on mm-hmm. the far right edge, or a purple border or a green border. Unless it has that little border on it, it can go anywhere in their zone. Mm-hmm. Great. Yeah. That's awesome. That is such a neat little play.
Yeah.
Love it.
So if we are comparing the three of them side by side, for me, Wingspan takes it on theme.
Oh, yeah.
Just hands down.
Yeah, hands down.
So our next one, production. Yeah, this is going to be one where we're pretty rough on Wyrmspan.
Yeah.
Because Stonemaier has set a standard. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that modern standard comes off of the original print of Wingspan because it had the beautiful linen rule books and all the pretty cards and the wooden dice, and it had all the stuff in there. And while I think some of the later printings have been a little rougher because they got rid of the plastic card trays for the recycled paper ones, which aren't as strong, unfortunately. I get why they did it. I love that they are going on an environmentally friendly route. But it's interesting that when you look at Finspan, the plastic one is back.
Uh-oh.
So if we're looking at main share components, cards. The cards in Wingspan are excellent because it gives you all the information you need. It is clear to read. It is easy to understand. Everything is there. And the fact that they were able to create the large print cards, which clean them up even further, pull off anything that is not game necessary and makes it more approachable, speaks to how clean those cards are because they are just perfectly functional. And the art on them is gorgeous. Mm-hmm. when we're looking at Wyrmspan, this is another one where it really falls down for me.
Yeah.
Because while the art is gorgeous, it's crammed in. And there's so much stuff on those cards that even somebody like myself, who I have quite literally taught Wingspan thousands of times, I can get lost in some of the cards because there's just so much stuff going on there. And then Finspan is really interesting cards because how often are we playing with landscape-oriented cards?
Yeah.
And it is a return to clean basics. Here's the very simple symbols you need. Here's the line of text on them. They're very readable, very approachable.
It feels very much they went back to Wingspan and sat there said, let's give you a gorgeous picture. Let's make sure everything's nice, crisp, and clear. We'll give you a nice little blurb about the creature and let you go from there. And the artwork is gorgeous.
Yeah.
Phenomenal.
I think they could easily make large print cards for Finspan without any issue. You couldn't do that with Wyrmspan.
You can't do that with Wyrmspan unless you're gonna print it over top of the artwork or remove the artwork. And then why would I play the game?
Yeah, which is such a shame because the art in Wyrmspan is,
when you look at the original artwork, it's gorgeous.
yeah, it's some of my favorite in board gaming. Frankly, I was a boy growing up in the '90s, and I was a teenager in the early aughts. Of course, I love dragons.
Yeah.
So when I saw the original art for this before it got announced, it's like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. I can't wait to see what this game does.
Totally did a squee. Just went, ooh.
Yeah, it's so pretty, and it gets lost in everything else, which is such a shame.
Yeah.
When we're looking at the player boards, the Wingspan ones are very clear. Again, this goes back to that thematic integration of when you look at the board, the water row is a lake or a pond or a river or whatever it is. And you have fields above it where like everything makes sense. The board is very clear. I really appreciate what they do. I think even when you're looking at the Oceania boards, which have all the extra iconography on them, they're still eminently readable.
Yes. Finspan, going to the newest game, gorgeous. All makes sense. You literally have this very nice shoreline at the top of the board because, of course, you're now also playing this one in portrait.
Yes.
So the other two games you went landscape and your cards were portrait. This time, this board is portrait form.
Yeah.
And you play the cards in landscape. But like you have this gorgeous reef that's on the one side and the nice watercolors that go all the way down to the end. Gorgeous board.
Yeah.
Honestly, I love this board more than the Wingspan board.
I have to agree. My only issue with the Finspan board is that it's long.
It's really long.
Like for us to play the game against each other, even in a 2-player, we had to align the boards just right.
Yeah.
But you know what? The setup of the game is put out some tokens, plop a deck of cards out.
It took no space.
So
Comparatively,
it doesn't matter that the boards are longer because even in Wingspan, you're setting up the dice tower and you're setting up the end of round goal board and you're doing all the extra stuff. It takes almost nothing to set up Finspan.
And the end of gold board was not even that big. I think it was
the size of the
original.
one.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Maybe a little smaller, not by much, but like we're talking millimeters, people.
Yeah. And then you look at Wyrmspan and you have all the player boards, which are the same size as the Wingspan ones. Then you have the big Dragon Guild board and you have the card draw board.
Yep.
And you have
it's a lot of table space.
It's in the end around goal board. It takes up so much space in a way that is just unpleasant because all those boards are different sizes. And so it's so frustrating to have to finagle everything because there is so much on the table. You have 2 decks of cards because you have the cave cards and the dragon cards. You have all the resources. You have all the things that are just...
all the things.
Good night, people. Yeah,
and then the board. I mean, look, it's not pretty.
Which is a shame because if you were to take off all the iconography, I actually would disagree with you. I think what is here, all the watercolor, all the various biomes are very pretty. It just means nothing.
I guess that's more true than anything because it doesn't mean squat.
So when you're looking at Wyrmspan, and I guess this will get slightly into the gameplay section, but you have to excavate a cave out to be able to play a dragon on top of it. The markings showing that are so faint that it is really easy to lose that fact on the first column in each row because it's already excavated. And so if you don't realize that, because the lines, especially in the yellow row, are so faint, they're so easy to get lost, that when I taught multiple people for the first time, they excavated every space, not just the following 3, because it doesn't look like it.
Right.
The player board is just a mess. And it's a real shame because I like the system of you're going to get a thing, activate a dragon, get another thing, activate another dragon. I like the interstitial rewards. I really like that balance. But because of how difficult to read the board is, it just brings it down.
Yeah.
And then we get into what's actually in the box. Again, we've talked about it for Wingspan. You have the really fancy eggs, you have the wooden dice, you have the card trays, everything you need that is in there, and it all fits in. You look at Finspan, I got weirdly excited when I opened the box of Finspan because it was so clean and so well set up of player boards on the bottom. Here's the card tray. Here's the cards inside the tray. Here's your tokens. And there was even a quarter of the box as a spacer just to keep everything in place, because while the box needs to be that size, there's space in it. You don't have to worry about what's there. And it gives you what you need to store the cards, which is great. You look at Wyrmspan, and there's no card tray. There's no good storage solution for all this stuff. So unless you have or use bags, or you're like me and you just have a spare old school Wingspan plastic tray, you just kind of have to come up with your own solution for the ton of cards that are in this box.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of really nice little trays that is what I put like the coins and the eggs in, but there's only 2 of them. So there's not enough there. The production on this one is just so weirdly covered in misses that Stonemaier doesn't normally make.
Right. It's like they didn't have it go through, quality control. Like, is this up to our standard? And it could have been, especially when you're looking at what's in these other 2 boxes.
Yeah.
It's almost like they should have done Finspan first, done the easier one, so that Wyrmspan could have baked a little more.
I agree with that.
Because I really want to like Wyrmspan.
I agree. I still own my copy, and we'll get into that a little further on in the conversation. But yeah, I agree. I find it to be such a weird thing that they put out Apiary in October and then had Wyrmspan in February. Same designer, wildly different approaches. Because again, Apiary is just such a banger.
Chef's kiss.
Like my game of 2023.
Oh yeah.
Not even a question.
Not even a question. Just so that you guys are listening, like, we played this game the moment it came out. We drove up to Michigan to go play with friends from Michigan and Illinois.
Yep.
And the game was what? It's supposed to be like a 90-minute game.
Yeah.
And then we played it for like 2.5 hours because we were laughing so hard.
We were just having such a good time
Such a good time with it. And then, like, we've played it since then. We still have such a good time with it.
The expansion's incredible.
The expansion's amazing.
And then we look at Wyrmspan, and
we were so excited.
I remember, it's funny, when Wingspan was announced, and we've talked about this on the pod before, but I remember looking at it and being like, nah, birds.
Yeah.
And then those initial reviews rolled in, and I got in on the second print that they announced in March, so I had it in May.
Okay.
And so I had it before a lot of people, and I'm like, oh boy, this is so good. When Wyrmspan was announced, I was like, okay, I'm in for the theme. I already knew the theme. I knew the art. And the more I looked into it, I'm like, oh no. And my fears panned out on this one. Yeah. Then I looked at Finspan. I'm like, I don't care about fish. But you know what? I didn't really care about birds as a theme either. So let's see what happens. And it's really good.
Well, and because of Wyrmspan, I held out.
You did? Yeah.
I went, I don't think I'm going to go with it because I was very excited because I sold my copy. And I had all the fancy tokens and everythand I went,
And you don't get rid of games.
I don't get rid of games. And the moment I found out that I could gotten rid of it and someone wanted it, I went, here.
Yep.
What'd you give me for it? And I did it in trade.
We've talked about the gameplay, touched on here and there through this, but the course of the game is in Wingspan, you start with 8 turns in round 1, and you're going to lose a turn each round as you score, and so you're going to end with 5 turns in your 4th round. But it is very much that you do a lot to do very little in the first round, and you do not a lot to do a ton in your last round. Yeah. Really, really like that play style. I know there are people that love that gold token that says there's no goal, so you get an extra turn. I do not like that token because, you get an extra turn, but I would rather have my turns mean more. So I like that downscale a lot.
Because you're building an engine.
Yeah.
It's gorgeous.
And even by the 4th round, even though you have 5 turns, you get to run that engine so much. I really like it.
Beautiful.
Wyrmspan is a weird kind of inversion, kind of take on it, because you start with 6 turns, and then it's possible for you to gain more turns through the round. It's also possible to spend your turns because they're represented by dragon coins. So you might end up with 3 turns in a round, or you might end up with 15. We've seen that happen. We played a game, you and Jason and I, where in the final round you had 8 turns, I had 10, and Jason had like 16. He literally took an entire round worth of actions without us.
Yeah, because he held coins and bought stuff, and yeah, it was insane.
Yeah, and that scale never felt very good, because even though he took that many turns, he got to a point I was bored, because you can only take 3 explorers per region. He can only do so much with it.
Yeah.
And because eggs are so hard to come by in this one, it just, even though you can have all those turns, there's so many of them that just don't feel worth it.
Yeah.
But when you look at, I can keep a coin for 1 point. Okay. I guess. And then you're looking at Finspan, which you just have 6 turns. That's
Every time.
Every time, 6 turns.
You play 4 rounds with 6 turns.
Bang, 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 bang.
Yep.
And those turns are fast.
Yeah.
Even during a turn at the end of round 4, where you have all this stuff on the table and you're getting to do so many cool things, they're still really fast.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that is an issue that I have with Wingspan, of the game can just take a while. If you have people that know the game very well and you are just playing to play, you can get through it in about 90 minutes, but more often than not, you're going to be playing 2 to 3 hours, depending on how slow people are, how many effects, all the things. Wingspan can just go long in a way that Finspan doesn't.
Yeah.
And Wyrmspan, I have, even a solo game, never had it go under 2 hours. I have had a single game of this last 3.5 hours before. It is brutally long.
Yuck.
Yeah, it's a shame.
Yeah.
So when I'm looking at the way the games play against each other, frankly, I don't like Wyrmspan when it comes to its flow, because I feel like so many of the choices made in the design here are a meta response to the complaints made about Wingspan. Like, I get to run the lay eggs row over and over and over again. Cool, you can only run a row 3 times and it gets progressively more expensive because eggs are much harder to come by in Wyrmspan.
Yeah.
Whereas in Finspan, it's just each fish can have 1 egg. But that's fine, because you can lay them off that action. You can hatch them with the other row, whatever. It is such a weird, comparing the two to base Wingspan, the response of, we are going to be what is attempting to be a strategic response, strategic meta response, versus this one being, we're just going to streamline it.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane. And so amazing, because like, I never had the problem with, I can run the egg route. Like, okay, if that's how you want to play the game, that's the way to earn points. Mm-hmm. Wyrmspan is so much ramped up with the difficulty, and like, every time I've played it, and I've won several times, but it was like, I had to go through the cavern, I had to go through the grotto, I had to go through the abyss. I had to do those things, because if I didn't, I wasn't getting any resources, I wasn't drawing any cards, I wasn't making any eggs. Like, I had to do those things, because if I didn't get any caves. Like, you still don't get eggs.
Yeah.
Other things give you eggs. I had to do those things. If I didn't, I was wasting a turn.
Yeah, that's fair. Like, you were wasting a round, you mean?
Yeah, wasting
because
a round.
This one definitely feels more of a, you must do these things.
You have to.
And I think that's why that extra turn coin thing happens, because so much of what you're doing is mitigating against that, I have to do this.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
I definitely like the laissez-faire of Wingspan and Finspan. Just like, okay, what actions do I want to do? Okay, cool. I'm going to dive in the blue section of waters because I want cards.
Yeah. Like, it's really cool to be able to just be like, and here's 5 cards.
Yeah.
It's super cool.
Yeah. And it still has the same mechanic of, hey, this triggers for everybody. Mm-hmm. That was so cool. I'm like, oh, hey, Scott, get an egg.
It puts the pink powers into just you just get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there was go down the purple dive. This is going to let you lay your eggs. Go down the green. That's how you hatch and move your fish.
Yeah.
Phenomenal. Very simple.
Yeah.
But I didn't feel like I had to go through any of them.
Yeah.
Like, there's a little bit more player agency. Like, okay, do I draw now or do I hatch now? Because you have 6 actions.
Yeah.
At the very bottom of your dive is that special, each row has a special action that lets you do another thing, but you only do it once. So if I do dive down the blue a second time,
you're only getting that first retrieval.
I'm going to get that first neat retrieval. Oh.
That's a really interesting take on these games, because Wingspan, I think, needs you to be more inherently tactical based on the birds that you've drawn and what you have in hand, because you can develop a long-term strategy, but it really is more of a, what do I have access to right now? What combos can I make? I'm going to go from there. Wyrmspan, again, it feels like you are just forced into a strategy because so many of those cave cards, for instance, don't feel equivalent. Like I can have one that just gives me a turn coin. Great. And this other one can give me a bottle of milk or 2 bottles of milk, whatever.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, like a turn coin is more important than 2 bottles of milk.
Yeah.
It feels prescribed and forced in a way that I don't love. But you're right about Finspan of I can be long-term tactical because in the game we played, I had a fish that said at the end of the game, play a fish into the very bottom row. And I had a fish that I played on top of it that had to eat one and said, if it is in the bottom row, you score 5 points. And because of the fact you have your own personal discard pile, I knew based on the fact that retrieval action is there in the blue row or off of my other fish, I could build a strategy around that. And because I only beat you in that game by 6 points, that was essentially a winning move because I got 5 points for being there and a point for eating the fish under it.
Yep.
So it is actually a game where I feel like you can very easily build a long-term strategy. The other thing that I think Finspan does the best, and for me, it does the best because I like games that have an abundance, that it gives you a lot, right? We've talked about it with Flamecraft of I love mid-late game of Flamecraft. Like I'm going to go here and just make a fistful of resources.
Yeah.
Finspan just kicks you out the gate and says, here's 5 cards, here's some resources, go nuts. Wingspan, you have that really interesting tactical choice of, okay, here's my starting hand, here's my starting food, what do I want to try to build with? And Wyrmspan does a similar thing to Wingspan, where here's your starting cards, and pick your cards and then pick your resources, which is a nice way to do that. But because of the way the strategy of the game builds, I feel like it is much less impactful than either. But I am also a person that I like those games of abundance much more than those games of drought.
Yes, which Wyrmspan very much feels drought.
Until about halfway through, and now it's just you're making stuff hand over fist and you can't. It's such a weird arc in Wyrmspan because you feel like those first 2 rounds you were just resource starved, and then there's just this tip right at the end of the second or partway through the third round where you just have everything you need.
Yeah.
Every game I've played has always felt like that.
That's true. Yeah. Now I'm sitting there thinking about it. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
It's really weird.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Teachability.
Oh my gosh.
I think they're all approachable and easy to do. I think Finspan is by far the easiest.
Oh, very much so.
But I think when you're looking at the wing and worm, it really depends on, does the player in front of you, A, have gaming experience, and B, do they have experience with the other game?
True.
Because one of the things that really catches people off guard when they switch from one to the other is in Wingspan, you are going right to left. Wyrmspan, you are going left to right.
In Finspan, you're going top to bottom. Well, you're going wherever. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
you go
generally you're going top to bottom.
You go top to bottom when you're going to activate stuff, yeah.
But when it comes to these 2 games, it's a really big difference.
Yeah, between wing and worm, yeah.
Because especially when you're looking at worm and you need the cave, so I have a cave, but I don't have a dragon there. Oh crap, I can't move forward because I don't have a dragon sitting there. So I think the basic idea of you are going to get a handful of cards, you're going to get some resources, you are trying to develop your board as much as possible, do that along these various routes. I think they all are approachable for the teach, but you are going to spend by far the shortest amount of time on Finn, and you're going to spend the most on Worm, because even though there's only the 3 actions, explaining all the little catches and the different boards and everything else, it is just a longer teach.
Yeah. It's almost a slog.
I don't know if it's necessarily a slog, but I think we're saying that because we don't really like the game.
I mean...
Because at Gen Con, I can easily do here are the differences, and I can get that done and out pretty quick. Again, that's me, I guess, but...
That's you because you're used to teaching games, especially the Stonemaier variety. There is so much with Wyrmspan compared to the other 2.
Yeah.
I mean, even when you sit there and you add in the nectar and all the stuff that came in with the later versions of Wingspan, it's not as long of a teach. You can sit there and take a new person and be like, hey, I've got everything in this one. I'm going to teach you everything. I still don't think it'd be nearly as much as it is just for Wyrmspan. Maybe there is a little bit more, but I don't feel like it's...
It depends on what you have in. I feel like if you are using Oceania, I mean, I'm never going to use Oceania for a new player, ever. Because while there's not a ton of like radical differences, I mean, yeah, there's a full extra resource in the new boards, but the way it adjusts the strategy of the game, I want people to play the base game first.
Oh, true.
But if we are looking on a base box to base box, then yes, Worm is much more than Wing.
Yes, very much so.
Replayability. They're all great. If you like the game, they're infinitely replayable because the way the cards come out, the combinations that can happen. It's all the things we've talked about with games that we like with high modularity. Wingspan is one of the originators of that engine builder with a gigantic stack of cards.
Yep.
That Terraforming Mars, etc. It's given us games like Ark Nova and Earth and, these giant wads of here, we're going to build a giant thing. Cool. They're all incredibly replayable. Do you like the game? Cool. Replay it. You can find plenty of strategy there.
Yeah.
Expansions. So this is an interesting one because only one of them has an expansion right now.
Right. One's getting ready to come out with one.
And I am assuming there will be one for Finspan, but so
depending on how well it does.
So let's look at Finspan first
in
this case, because one of the things that this took from Wyrmspan is the tag system. So there's the predators and the bioluminescent, and there's a bunch of tags on the cards that don't inherently do a lot right now.
Correct.
Predator seems to be the only one that's really heavily referenced.
Yep.
So there is a lot of option for new interactions and new stuff there. If you look at the top of the board, this delta or whatever that's called up top, that symbol really isn't referenced at all in the base game, but it's even said in the rules, this will be an expansion thing.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to see what will happen here, because while there's some interesting choices between the fish, mechanically, I don't know that the bones are heavy enough to hold more mechanisms the way that Wingspan did.
I would completely agree with you. It's because, of course, when we sit there and look at the three, this one is very much so the light version.
Oh, yeah.
And so, yeah, you can't add a bunch of extra mechanisms because then you're going to bog it down.
Yeah.
If you still want it to be light, you don't want to do too much.
And unfortunately, because of the way they didn't specify the fish, it means that we're not going to have as clear of an expansion idea as here's Asia.
Right.
For Wingspan.
Right.
It's here's a bunch of really cool fish. But again, they don't have those thematic ties of this is why they're doing those. Yeah. It's just this one's going to hatch you 3 eggs. Cool. I don't know why, but it's going to do that.
Yeah.
So there's part of me that wonders if I need any expansion for this, frankly, because I think what's in the box here is great.
Yeah.
I think it's really replayable. The combination is really interesting. Even seeing some of the same fish from game to game, I'm reacting to them differently because of what I've already played and all the other things. So I think this one actually needs it the least.
Agreed.
If I was going to tell somebody, if you're only buying a base box, I think Finspan just because of what's there.
Yeah.
But this is also the advantage of other time and refinement on the system. What's interesting, we were talking about this before we started. The two designers of this game, David Gordon, has a couple of games out right now and some more coming out in March, but he's basically unpublished prior to Finspan. And then you have the other designer, Michael O'Connell, that this is his game. That's it. This is the only thing he has published. So I'm really interested on a designer level to see where are they going to be able to expand and change and experiment. Because when you look at Wingspan, it was her first game.
Yeah.
And look what it does. And I think when you're looking at the expansions for Wingspan, they're so interesting because each one does something different. Europe is more birds. Yeah, it adds in the end of round powers, but on the whole, it's more birds. Oceania is the advanced play of here's the nectar, here are the different player boards, here's more if you've already played the game. And then you have Asia, which is just different ways to play it. Of here's new 2-player mode, which Duet is still my favorite way to play Wingspan, or here's the big flock mode for 6 and 7 people. Each one modifies the system, but keeps its skeleton completely intact, and it carries everything you put on, because you can use every expansion at once, and it's going to be a giant stack of cards, but it works. The game still works in a way that a lot of other games with a bunch of expansions don't, if you add them all together. So I really like Wingspan for what it does. I'm always excited. I'm so excited to find out what the next expansion is that's coming out at the end of the year, because what are they going to add? What is it going to do? Yeah. And I think that one just speaks most to being the best for it because we've already had them. So this is a little bit of an unfair category because I think this has to go to Wingspan. Wyrmspan, I will admit I have kept because I need to have access to it. But I also am hoping for an Expeditions level turnaround here. I don't know what an expansion is going to do here. When you look at Apiary's expansion, it's just more stuff, and that's great because that's all that game needed was a little bit just more stuff. And it's perfect.
Yep.
I don't know what they're going to do with this one. I don't know if an expansion will be able to address the issues I have with the game. because do I really want more systems? Do I want more boards? Do I want more in this? I think the answer to that is no.
Yeah.
So I'm going to pick it up and I'm going to try it out. We're going to experiment. We'll review it when it comes out. But I don't know what an expansion will do to this game.
I don't know if it'd make it better.
And that's my problem. I don't know.
And I want it to make it better.
Yeah.
I really want to like Wyrmspan. I really want to like it.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't. And like hearing all the reviews and how many people are like, oh my God, this is so amazing. And I'm just sitting there going, what are you seeing?
Yeah.
I'm not, with all the games that I've played and all the games that have been on my shelves and all the games that I've sat at a table and played, why doesn't this one click?
Yeah.
And why don't I like it?
Because we, as Board All the Time, because Jason's included in this, we have bounced off this so hard.
Yeah.
And it really is one of those games where I think we're just in the minority.
Right.
And you know what? I'm
that's
happy
fine.
about
Yeah,
that.
I'm happy about that.
Because I'm loving the fact that people are loving on it.
Yes.
I just don't see it. Now, that said, my initial rating was a 3. And I have, over time, going through Gen Con, seeing people's reactions, playing more of it because I still pull it out at least once a month because I think, I got to see what's here. I'm up to a 5. But I mean, I have also given this game significantly more than any other game that I don't like because I want to like this one. I really do. Solo. You have only played Wingspan solo, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so this is
Yeah,
going to
because
be...
that didn't stay in my collection long enough for me to play Wyrmspan solo.
So I've played them all solo. Wingspan, I love. My problem with Wingspan solo is it is a lot to set up to just play by myself because it does take a lot of space. There's a lot of things. You have to set up Wingspan.
Yeah.
And then you have to, do some stuff for the solo. And it's so brutally difficult. My win rate against the solo Otoma in Wingspan is very bad. So I have to spend a lot of time setting it up to get my butt kicked. And I generally don't enjoy that.
Yeah, I wouldn't enjoy that either.
I actually prefer Wyrmspan solo. It is an interesting scale of difficulty. It is a interesting response to seeing what the opponent is doing, and the solo mode difficulties really ratchet things up. It also added in an interesting system that the Finspan one did of the Ravel system, where you can essentially add extra modifiers on and change out the deck and do some interesting things. So I actually do enjoy this one solo. Yes, it's still just as much a setup, but the overall table need for only one player is much lower than what a multiplayer game is.
Okay.
So if I'm going to pick between these two, I'm picking Wyrmspan because it is difficult, but it is beatable, but it's interestingly scalable.
Okay.
So there's actually a lot of good within the solo mode. It also helps that all these games can be accused of being multiplayer solitaire to some extent.
To some extent, yeah.
And because of the fact that my interaction with other people at the table in Wyrmspan is so low, I think it just is a better solo game for me. Finspan I love as a solo game because it's quick. I wish the deck of Otoma cards, or as they call it, the Nautoma, which is hilarious.
That is phenomenal.
I wish there were more cards in the box because you know what's going to happen in the solo mode. Generally, when you're playing it, is this a turn that they are going to make a school of fish or not? So there's not a ton of variety in the deck the way that the other two have. It does have the Ravel mode, which is really interesting in what it's trying to score for and what it's doing. For how easy it is to set up, for how fast it is to play, between the three, it's my preferred one for solo. But if I want a more challenging game versus I'm just going to play a bunch of fish and do a bunch of things and have some quick turns, I actually am going to pick Wyrmspan for solo. This is the one category that across the board Wyrmspan wins.
Nice.
Okay, so we have talked at length now over all this. Let's get down into our final thoughts, final comments, and in our this or that scenario, which one do you pick?
Wow. If you're going to sit there and you're going to give me... Man, if you're going to sit there and have me pick one of them, obviously I'm not picking Wyrmspan. That's the unfortunate thing. Now, mind you, when the expansion comes, and I know you'll have it.
And we're going to play it.
We're going to play it. And hopefully that makes me want to do the crazy thing and buy the game again.
Sure.
But I will. Sometimes there are those games that you need the expansion to fix it. Mm-hmm. They happen. We've talked about it before.
Mm-hmm. We've talked about Stonemaier games with Tapestry.
Yeah.
With Expeditions.
Sometimes it just happens.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that. It's the name of the game. At this current point in time, my choice is going to be Wingspan.
Sure.
Finspan, phenomenal game. Had an absolute blast of a time. I want to play that more just because it's new, and then I want to, kind of learn the intricacies and stuff like that. But it's just the fact of how much I really enjoy Wingspan. Mm-hmm. I feel fulfillment when I get done. Like when we got done playing Finspan, I knew I had a good game. I swore that you were going to beat me. I thought you had me.
I had no idea you had as many points on your board as you did.
And then when I sat there and I lost, but only by 6, I was ecstatic with how well I did. Wingspan, I don't win hardly ever. I think I've won once.
I am routinely bad at Wingspan compared to the crazy Wingspan people, because Wingspan people are nuts.
Wingspan people. Yeah. I love Wingspan. I still feel fulfilled. Even when I get beat badly, I'm still like, oh, that was such a good game.
Yeah.
Because I'm happy with how my engine was built.
Oh, yeah.
Or I'm happy with, did you see how many eggs I had? Like every single bird had eggs. Like there was one bird that did not have all of its eggs that it could have on its nest. Love that.
Yeah.
Absolutely love that. It makes me very, very giddy that I didn't ever get from Wyrmspan. Mm-hmm. And I feel Finspan's going to be the exact same way.
Yeah.
Like the simplicity of the game lends to replayability. So like Wingspan edges Finspan, but not by a ton.
Yeah.
And Wyrmspan exists, unfortunately.
I have been really fighting over this in my head for the past week as I've played Finspan a not insignificant amount.
Right.
Really enjoy it. And like I said, if we're talking solo, it's Wyrmspan. Mm-hmm. But right now, it is still Wingspan.
Right.
But by the narrowest of edges.
Yes.
Because I was sitting here and thinking, boy, I really like this game.
Yeah.
Like, I might like it more than Wingspan.
Yeah. Which is nuts to say, isn't it?
Oh, I know. Because I have been playing Wingspan for 6 years.
Right.
And off of the first play I had of it, I was like, oh my God, this might be better.
Yeah.
And as it comes down to it, the reason I pick Wingspan is because that extra layer of complexity. Mm-hmm. While I love the way Finspan works and the way that it is snappy turns and you feel fulfilled in all the things you said, mm-hmm. at the end of the day, my choices are fairly limited mm-hmm. because the way I play the fish and what fish I have and the way I can make the combos work is very satisfying. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, I have 2 choices. Play a fish, go diving.
Yep.
And
which is fine for that game right now.
Exactly.
It's perfect.
And because of the fact that I don't know what the expansions are going to do and mm-hmm. everything, if it gets expansions, all the things, I don't know any of them.
We don't know that.
Because I have so many different ways to approach Wingspan of, you're a new player? Great. Let's sit down. We're going to play base game.
Yep.
Oh, you want to play 2 players with me? We're going to add in the area control board. It has that modularity. It has that flexibility that I have there. Mm-hmm. If I'm looking on a base box to base box comparison, I actually think I'm going to pick Finspan. But because I have everything for Wingspan, because I have those options, Wingspan still wins.
Yeah.
But depending on where that one goes, I could reasonably see it overtake. And I never thought wait, it's fish?
Yeah.
All right, fine. I'm in because I almost made that mistake for Wingspan. So I'm just going to believe the best here. I did not think I was going to enjoy this anywhere near as much as I knew I was going to enjoy it more than I did Wyrmspan. Mm-hmm. I did not expect to walk out of every play so far and going, do I like this better than Wingspan?
I was not expecting it. I was expecting to have a good time. I was expecting to have a good time.
Not that good of a time.
Not that good of a time. Like, yeah, I'm right there with you. Finspan is underneath Wingspan by the narrowest of margins.
I give both games a 9.
Oh, easily. Yes. Like if I had to sit there and even break it down into the decimal points that we don't do, we're talking it's like 9.5 to like 9.25. It's that small of a margin.
It's really good.
It's really good. I think we've done a very good job with the span of the games.
How dare you?
Yep.
We have tried to record on Wyrmspan multiple times because, like we've said, we want to love this game. But each time we have recorded, it just didn't feel like we were doing a fair enough service to the game.
Correct.
For what it could be, for what we wanted, all the things.
It just seemed like we were more having a gripe session about the game.
Yeah.
And that's not fair to the game, and it's not fair to you guys, our listeners. Because if we want to complain about the game, we complain about the game to each other. We've done that before. But now having 3 different games that we've played, and we've played enough that we can see the differences.
Yeah.
Now it feels like we're not complaining. It's, here's our evidence.
I am so interested to see what this expansion does.
I'm very interested to see what it does.
I want more Wingspan.
Oh!
Because
it's Wingspan.
The game can hold it all.
Yeah.
It's great. I'm so excited about that.
Yeah.
I want to see what happens here. And frankly, if Finspan ever gets one, not concerned. It will, I am sure.
Oh, yeah.
But if it doesn't, I think that base box is incredible. So I would be interested when we come back around next year after the expansions, because we'll see what happens. Mm-hmm. But to have a just refresh conversation on this, but as it stands right now, there's 3 very well-designed games.
Oh, yeah.
We bounced off of Wyrmspan, but it is easy to recommend for people that like this particular type of game.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Wyrmspan goes on certain people's tables, just not mine, and that's completely fine. It's still a well-built game. It just doesn't do anything for me.
Yeah.
Not in the same breath that how Finspan, such is my game, and of course Wingspan.
Yeah.
Love those 2 games, and I sincerely very much hope that the expansion for Wyrmspan makes me love it.
Yeah.
Because I want to love it.
On that, guys, thank you so much for coming out to this new episode of This, That, or in this case, the other thing for the Span series. On that, Scott, I am super bored of you.
Wait, I thought we were going to play more board game? More board games. Board games. Hello? Board games.
Fine, we'll play more board games, but then you're getting out of my house.
Fine. Well, nuts.